Good evening, my name's Julie Benson from Leeds. I would like to ask the panel, why unlike in Australia, when people were flying back in before they closed the borders, people were made to isolate into a hotel for 2 weeks and weren't allowed to go home until they were tested and cleared. I would like to understand why we're not taking those kind of measures in this country, why we're allowing people to fly in and not isolating them the same in a hotel. Thank you.
And week after week, while we've been doing this new version of Question Time, this question has come up, which is why I want to take it tonight. Jean, I'm going to start with you. This is happening in Scotland as well as the rest of the UK. Is that going to change, or are we just going to let people come in willy-nilly?
Well, we can't make that decision here in Scotland because the decision about our ports, whether they're airports
of course, it's not divulged. What would you like to happen?
Government. But our view, my view, is that what the questioner has just asked is absolutely right. And so we will be wanting the UK government to give very serious consideration to stopping the inward transmission of the virus, particularly given the fact that the people across Scotland and indeed across the UK have worked so hard to successfully suppress it to this point. It seems to me foolhardy to then not give very serious consideration to what we do about international travel, both into and out of the UK.
And is this something you've been pushing for as the Scottish Government?
It's something that we have raised, and in the continuing discussions as we collectively look across the four nations about what measures might we take to ease the lockdown in any respect, that will be one of the areas that we will want to pursue with the UK government and with the Prime Minister in the discussions that we have.
I mean, Anneliese, people, as I said, people have been asking this time and time again and just can't seem to understand. To be honest, I'm not sure I can either. Why, when so many other countries, Australia being one, but lots of other countries, put people into quarantine if they come into the country, we're not doing that. Would you like to see that change?
Well, I think there have been very serious concerns around this, and what we've been saying to government is that it needs to be open around its reasoning on this question. I mean,
so it's not that you'd like it to change, but you just like to understand the reason.
We need to understand why that decision has been taken, because you're right, practice in other countries has been different. Actually, if we look at people who've been coming into the country, I've been dealing with huge numbers of Brits who are all around the world who would desperately love to be back here and are being brought back at a much slower rate than if they were another country's national. But, you know, hopefully Grant may be able to enlighten us a little bit more, because I accept that on the one hand, you know, for example, some of the measures that were put in place in other nations haven't necessarily worked. For example, you know, temperature measurement as people come in, because, you know, that's not robust, obviously. But I think we do need to look at the fact that potentially there have been people coming into the country who might have been taking the virus with them. I suppose that the problem is this is then conjoined with that testing issue. I'm sorry to bring it back to that. I know we've just been talking about it, but, you know, if people who had come back into the country had then been able to quickly access a test for themselves to know what their situation was, then, you know, we could have dealt with this more robustly. I think this is more of an issue because we don't yet have that community testing in the UK to the extent that applies in many other countries.
Henry D has tweeted in, we're all on lockdown, so why not ban people coming into this country without being tested, and they should spend 14 days in quarantine. I mean, interestingly, Australia and New Zealand were introducing this policy when we were going to the Cheltenham races. I mean, is this going to change, Grant?
Yeah, different countries are in different parts of or different moments in this pandemic at different times. But whilst it's endemic in this country, and in other words, prevalent amongst the population, it makes no great difference to the overall figures according to the scientists and the medical experts. However, that changes as we get a grip of those numbers and then becomes something that is actually very valuable to do, because you can stop it from coming in. So we're starting to use the classic flattening of the curve. It's starting to come down. There is the important point, of course, as Anneliese raises, of returning British nationals who are abroad here. But it's absolutely true to say, I think if the British people themselves are being asked to continue with social distancing measures, then it's quite right to expect people coming into the country would have the same measures applied to them. So it's actually something that very much, as we get to the smaller numbers and not wanting to see a repeat of the infection, something very much as a live discussion.
Paul?
I think this is obvious. We should be doing it. I hope with the capacity for testing that we would have in place and with the recognition of the importance of this, in the coming months we'll introduce this, because this isn't going to go away in a hurry. We need it.
And you do other things as well. You'd require people coming into the country to download the NHS app for the tracking, tracing purposes as well. So it's got to be the same rule for everybody. So I entirely agree with the questioner. It's got to be the same thing for everybody.
George?
I mean, look, I think the lesson of all of this is treat the public like adults and explain to them exactly why you're doing these various things. And I think, you know, otherwise people sit at home and they go, hold on, like there's a lone walker in Derbyshire and they've got a drone following them and barking at them to go back home, when you've got like thousands of people going through Heathrow Airport. And, you know, Grant says, the scientists tell us at the moment that's not statistically significant. Well, then the lone walker's not statistically significant either. And I think, you know, I think we've passed through the phase of the crisis where, you know, because people are very afraid, understandably for themselves and their loved ones, they'll just take the word of the government, and the Prime Minister, you know, stands there, as he did again today, and he's, you know, very impressive and optimistic when he does that. But I think we're coming to the end of just taking the kind of ministerial diktat. People are getting their information from all over the world about how different countries are dealing with this, how different opinions on how it should be done. And I think we're moving into a phase where actually it's in the government's interest to open this up, explain all their thinking, and carry people with them. Try and carry the opposition with them, try and carry the media with them, but above all, try and carry the public. And whether as a newspaper editor or indeed as a former politician, I always found if you treated the public like adults, they responded like adults.
I think George is so right there. I'm not sure we've been treating the public society as grown-ups. I mean, we've had these sort of slightly weaselly explanations about what we should be doing and, you know, capacity and all of these sorts of things. We are in a crisis. We know it's difficult. We need, for leadership, you need to actually be seen to take on the problems and explain them. And that, I think that's the way through it. I add to that, also, we have to act better as a community as well. We have to work together to get this through. But we need proper leadership, proper transparency, proper communication, so that we can get through that with a better community.